This story here is interesting. A New York Times article, and it's kind of making the rounds. There are things that they don't mention in this article that I do have to address. So you probably heard it by now. If you didn't, check this out. At Black colleges, a stubborn gender enrollment gap keeps growing. Only 19% of students at Howard University are Black men whose enrollment levels at four-year colleges have plummeted across the board. So I want to start out by saying this before we get into the piece. It's actually not just Black men. It's men. It's all men, but the numbers are more significant with Black men. And we'll show you the graphs, show you what that looks like. But this came up on Call-In and people were like, can we talk about the decline of college enrollment for Black men? So we'll go into a little bit here, and then I'm going to tell you some of the things that they left out as to why this is an issue, why this is happening. Let's go ahead and go on a little bit more here. Before stepping foot onto Howard University's campus, Skylar Wilson knew she would see more women there than men. But just how many more stunned her? Howard, one of the more elite, historically Black colleges and universities in the nation, is only 30% men, 19% Black men. I was like, wow, said Miss Wilson, a 20-year-old junior. How is that possible? Howard is not unique. The number of Black men attending four-year colleges has plummeted across the board, and nowhere is this deficit more pronounced than at historically Black colleges, we say HBCUs. Black men account for 26% of the students at HBCUs, down from an already low 38% in 1976. This is according to the American Institute for Boys and Men. There are now about as many non-Black students attending HBCUs as there are Black men. Let's pause there for just a second. There's a couple of things happening here. I worked in higher ed for about 11 years. It was over 10 years, about 11 years-ish. So there's a couple of things at play here. Number one, I know this New York Times article was published this month, but this has been a trend for years, right? There's been articles published about this years ago that is just continuing to decline. Having worked with admissions process for colleges, I do think it's important that people understand something that this article leaves out. And it's a little bit different now considering SCOTUS has removed affirmative action from universities. When you apply to these schools in the past, when I was in those positions, people get a certain number of points. And I want to explain what that means. It means that we have Jay-Z and Beyonce, okay? Just pretend they're not famous. We have Jay-Z and Beyonce, and they both apply to Howard University, or let's say even a PWI. Let's say Howard University, and let's say they apply to American University. They're both in DC. They're both Black, but there's something different about one of them, right? So as a Black applicant, as a Black male applicant at that point, you would get a point because you were Black, right? And to be very clear, the test scores count first. When we had to sort through those applications, the very first thing we sorted by were the test scores, then the GPA, and then those other factors came in later. So I have 2 seats left, and I got Beyonce and I got Jay-Z, okay? Or 1 seat left. I can only take one of them. So Jay-Z gets a point because he's Black. Beyonce gets a point because she's Black. However, Beyonce gets another point because she's a woman. That's 2 points for her, 1 point for him. The point that I'm trying to make is this. It's not even so much that Black men aren't applying. That's part of it. But in the past, when they did, and I sat in during these admission, long meetings, oftentimes what would happen is that the female card trumps the Black male card, because now you have someone that has 2 criteria, female and Black versus someone that has one when you're talking about diversity. Yes, this is real and it does happen. And I've tried to tell people about this for quite some time. This has been an issue. So some of those applicants do get looked over because of that reason. That's one part of it. Let's get into a little bit more. The decline has profound implications for economic mobility, family formation, and wealth generation. Raj Chetty, a Harvard economist, goes on to say that the causes are many. Higher college costs, the immediate financial needs of Black families, high suspension rates in high school, and a barrage of negative messages about academic potential all play roles in the decline of Black male enrollment and college completion. Howard estimates that its cost of attendance for undergraduates easily exceeds $50,000 a year. So we all know that finances is a big factor. College is more and more expensive, and more often than not, usually we are the ones that will have to apply for financial aid, right? Especially if you're trying to go to a school like Howard. I mean, I went to a state school for undergrad, so Howard, there's no way I would have been able to afford to go there, right? So we know that finances in itself is going to be an issue. But one of the things that's mentioned here, I think people need to hold on to are the high school suspension rates. When you look at the numbers, it shows you that more often than not, typically Black male students in high school have higher number of suspension than Black female students. And we'll get into the school to prison pipeline in just a second. But the disciplinary measures actually does make a difference. When you're applying to college, or if you're thinking about applying to college, one of the things, like, these things show up. So if you've constantly been like suspended or expelled or whatever, that doesn't make you a great applicant for a lot of these universities. Also, you feel less inclined to even apply anyway. When teachers show you they don't give a damn about you, when they feel like you're a lost cause, why would you think it would be a good idea for you to apply to go to college when the educators at your high school don't care about you? It's a whole other conversation that needs to happen there. If we're serious about reducing race gaps in economic opportunity, household wealth, etc., then our attention should be squarely focused on economic outcomes for Black boys and men, period. Full stop. That's from Richard Reeves, who's the president of the American Institute for Boys and Men. So, and I'll leave this picture here as I say this. The male to female ratio, when we talk about colleges, let's do undergrad. Even when I was in undergrad, which was a long time ago, there was more women. Even when I was in undergrad, it was, I can't think of one school that my friends went to where it was the other way around, where it was more men than it was women, unless you're going to a school like MIT, right? But MIT has even gotten better about that. So what's this really about? Do you guys remember last year, before the election, when they were interviewing Black male voters? One of the things that was said is that Black male voters were looking to be entrepreneurs, were looking to own businesses. They were interested in business. That was something that continued to come up, right? Well, I want you to think about how things are today. Nowadays, you don't have to go to college to be an entrepreneur. It can help. You can go to business school and pay a lot of money for an MBA. You can do those things, but you don't have to. Even some of the students that I advised at the business school at BU told me afterwards, this was a great program, but I could have learned all this online. We live in a creator influencer society now. Why would you pay all this money or take out student loans to attend school if you want to be an entrepreneur or influencer when you can do that without going to college? Why would you do that? You literally have people on TikTok making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. You have influencers on Instagram making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Why would they pay to go to college? That's something to think about there. We also talked about the fact that the tool belt generation is coming back around again, where more men in particular are looking into professions like welding, which pays really well, carpentry, which also pays well. There is a shift that is happening. I covered the tool belt generation last year, but I want to show you this as well. And this is another one that I think we need to be real here, folks. When I talked about the suspension rates, why have the declines been especially severe for Black men? Let's get into this part. Men college going rates are declining across all races and socioeconomic groups, but some of the steepest drops have been among Black males. Nowhere is that pronounced more than in the public 2-year colleges, where the number of Black male students plunged 21.5% in the spring of 2021. For Black teens, who are more likely than those from other demographics to be raised by single mothers, the dearth of male teachers leaves them without relatable role models to encourage a focus on academics. They often get the message from peers that being openly smart or spending too much time on schoolwork is uncool. Black boys are more likely to be disciplined for behavior that might be tolerated in a white student. Those who attended under-resourced schools are less likely to have access to college preparatory courses and college guidance. If they do make it to college, they're more likely to be diverted to remedial classes that could discourage them or slow them down. And then I'm gonna get to the pandemic part here in just a second. This is especially important. School to prison pipeline, folks. Who was usually a part of the school to prison pipeline? Black boys. So some of them don't make it. They don't make it from high school to college. And when you're constantly being disciplined, you're constantly written up, you constantly have to go to the principal's office, right? That doesn't give you the impression that the people there actually care about you. And I've seen it myself with my eyes. Yes, they do discipline Black male students harder than they do other students. I've seen it. So why would you want to do that? Why would you even think about going to college? If the current educators that you have in high school are not there for you, don't show you that they actually care or give a damn, why would you think that the educators at a university would? Things to think about. The pandemic. This is another one. We can't forget about this, folks. The COVID pandemic here. The pandemic coincided with a series of high-profile police brutality incidents that shook the confidence of young Black men that American society is just and their future is theirs to shape. They were more likely to live in households with shaky internet access and attend schools that struggled to keep students engaged virtually. As the pandemic dragged on, they were especially likely to feel cast adrift. And this is one of the things I screamed about during the lockdowns. These schools, these public schools, when they sent all those kids home and said, you're going to learn virtually on your laptops, they assumed every student had a laptop. They didn't think about the fact that some of these kids in Roxbury and Dorchester don't have their own bedroom. They're sharing a room with a brother or a sister. And now you got all four of them in one bedroom trying to learn remotely, and everybody don't have their own laptop. They didn't think about those things. School performance declined during that period for that reason. They didn't think about the fact that some of these kids live in communities where they don't have access to strong Wi-Fi. And that in itself is also a disruptor. The point is, it's discouraging. The point is, it makes you feel like you're sitting there, you're trying to learn, and you can't even hear what the teacher is saying because the connection keeps getting lost. That's frustrating. And you shouldn't have to deal with that in a learning environment. These are the things that people didn't want to acknowledge during that time. So there's a number of things that are happening here, folks, but you have to see it's across the board, not just with Black men, although it's the highest with Black men. What's behind the growing gap between men and women in college completion? Let's just take a look here at this chart. This goes back to even in 2021. That's why I told you it's not new. Women in the US are outpacing men in college graduation. So you can see the difference here. Okay, percentage of adults ages 25 and older with a bachelor's degree, this graph here. Women 39, men 37%. Oh, I don't know what happened there. I think I accidentally clicked on it. Sorry. This graph, percentage of adults ages 25 to 34% with a bachelor's degree. Women 46%, men 36%. So you can see women going back to 2021, that was already starting. So there's a couple of things when we think about the fields that women tend to go into and that men tend to go into. Like I said, if we think back to what those guys said last year, what they wanted, what they were looking for in a president, they were interested in business. They said, we want business, we want entrepreneurship, those types of things. Like I said, nowadays, you don't really have to go to business school to make that happen. It helps, but you don't have to do it. 2, look at the fields that women tend to go into, right? We tend to go into fields that are a little bit more nurturing or caretaker roles. We're more likely to become teachers, nurses, or you guys get where I'm going with this, right? And I'm telling you, I can count on my hand how many Black male teachers I had growing up. So that's something to think about. And if men are going into those fields that don't require a college degree, like welding or carpentry, then so be it. And then they don't have to worry about student loan debt or anything like that. The concern that the New York Times article had was that decline that they're seeing at the HBCUs says, oh, well, that may be a disruption for Black women who are trying to find like their future significant other or future husband at universities. Because a lot of times it's where people like meet their future husband or whatever. But if you want that to change, then you kind of got to give the Black male students the same respect that you give the Black female students. And in my years working in education, I haven't seen that. Haven't seen it. So if they don't feel like they're getting what they need at these schools, why would they want to go to school again for another 4 years? Something to think about, folks. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.